Alright guys, welcome back to another Master and Apprentice video and podcast. Now, with the new Spider-Man Brand New Day movie coming out in just about a month, we've got a lot of Spider-Man on everyone's mind, right? The tickets are out, the popcorn buckets are being revealed, the new trailer, everything. And there's been a long history of live action Spider-Man back from the early 2000s with Tobey Maguire to the Andrew Garfield era, right around the inception of the MCU at its peak. Sony's, kind of shifted to their new era of Spider-Man, and then eventually when Tom Holland was brought over into the MCU, and we got another variation of Spider-Man, I feel like it's probably, obviously goes without saying, subjective. What you prefer, what you like. Everyone's got their own bias. But I thought it'd be fun, and it was actually Athen's suggestion, but go over all the Spider-Man movies and either rank them or put them up against each other and just talk about it, right? Because you don't get where we're at now without all these other Spider-Man movies, right? Without this long history of live-action Spider-Man. So we'll go through it, try to go through it, I guess, in order, not necessarily how they're put canonically, because I'm still not clear on how that is, but in order of when they released, right? And we'll go over, kind of compare them to their own franchise, right? Tobey had 3, Andrew had 2, and technically Tom's had quite a few. We'll try to keep it to their own single movie release, right? So Tom is in Homecoming or Civil War, Infinity War, all these Avengers movies. Those aren't really his movies though, so we'll kind of try to keep it more contained to their movies. We'll try to compare it to all the other ones, right? Like, they each have their own first movie, right? So we'll try to compare the first Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire compared to the first Spider-Man Homecoming to Andrew's first Spider-Man, right? And we'll try to compare them just in that way. But yeah, goes without saying, these are all a little bit subjective, but we're going to try to rank them and get right into it. So the first one we're going to talk about is 2002, the Spider-Man movie, Tobey Maguire. This is part of when Marvel, I don't think there was anything else. Oh, the X-Men, that's right. So X-Men was coming out around this time as well, and there was this new interest in live-action heroes, right? We kind of had some stuff from the 70s and 80s that wasn't great. But then we get this, we get the Fantastic Four, we get X-Men, and there's just this new era. And these are all contained to their own universe, unlike, the MCU. But they did have this sense of very open, right? It was the first time we've seen something that, wasn't just a contained little live action or animated series, it was live action. And I gotta say, out of all of the first Spider-Man movies, so 2002 Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 2012, and Spider-Man Homecoming, I think the first introduction movie, I think Tobey's is my favorite. I think it does the best job of really showing Peter Parker getting the radioactive bite, and really the change with Uncle Ben and the death of Uncle Ben, and the new felt responsibility of being Spider-Man. That whole identity, and the identity crisis that he goes through is part of the core character of Spider-Man, and I don't think any movie shows it better than this one, right? I mean, frankly, Tom Holland's, we never really get that, right? We kind of get it a little bit in No Way Home when Aunt May dies, but it's just a very completely different story beat than what this one has to offer. And not to say I don't like Andrew Garfield's, but it's a lot different, right? Just the way it's portrayed, and I really like this one. I gotta say, I'm obviously a little bit nostalgic over it. It's the Spider-Man that I grew up. I was born in 2003, so from a very early age, from almost a toddler, the first superhero movies I watched was stuff like this, and so I always really, really loved this one. I thought, a lot of people would harp on the Green Goblin. I think the core ingredient, the Green Goblin, in every comic run and every story he's ever in, is that he's psychotic, right? You can't reason with him. He's just evil for the sake of being evil. There's not a lot of reason and sense behind him. And boy, does Willem Dafoe do an excellent job. I mean, I want to say probably, maybe I'm speaking out of line, but the best Spider-Man live action villain we have. Out of all the movies, I feel like this is probably the best portrayed, best acted, and like the relationship of Spider-Man and Green Goblin is super good in this movie. We see Peter actually have a relationship with characters like Harry and MJ, right? Like, these are really important relationships in the Spider-Man mythos, and I feel like, again, this movie just does the best job of really starting the Spider-Man universe off. The Spider-Man trilogy, the Spider-Man movies, this one does the best job at it. I'm not going to necessarily rank it. You know what? Screw that. We'll rank it. Out of the Spider-Man movies, I'd probably give this one, compared to the rest, not compared to any other Marvel movie or anything like that, I'd probably give this a 7.5 out of 10. It's very high. It's very contained to just like, the Green Goblin and, the inception of Spider-Man. I would probably rank it a little bit higher, but I haven't seen it in a minute, so I'm trying to play it on the safer side without, being too biased or too nostalgic. But like 7.5 out of 10. If you want to know who Spider-Man is and who Peter Parker is in the story, you don't necessarily need to go back and read those early comics. You can watch this movie, and I feel like you get a pretty good sense of who that character is.
Yeah, this one I'm giving an 8 out of 10. One thing I will say is almost all the movies that came out in this era, I go back and this like time period, the early 2000s, I go back, I watch them in the past 3-5 years, and everything just feels slow back then. I mean, probably because my brain rot attention span isn't there anymore. But I've watched this, I want to say it was a year ago, and it captivated me the whole time. I mean, I've seen this movie at least 5 times. It's great, and one thing that I really like about it, above Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, is that this Spider-Man is a dork, and he gets power. Where, as Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, he's also a dork a little bit, but he kind of stands up for himself before, and then he gets power. I feel like this is really going from the no self-confidence Spider-Man, and then he gets all this power, and then he's like, wow, I'm everything, and then he really learns the responsibility of it. And I feel like that's a personal preference. I'm not really knocking Andrew Garfield down anything for that. But, I mean, Sammy said it first, Willem Dafoe is amazing, and if you aren't, like, fully convinced by this movie, you can go watch Spider-Man No Way Home, and he is still amazing in that movie, too. And we'll get to that when we get to that, but this one is one of my favorites. I'm usually not one to go for the first one's the best one, always, in every situation, but this one, I think this is the best one of the Tobey Maguire trilogy, and I want to give it 8 to an 8.5 out of 10. I'll probably just give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah. The next one we have is Spider-Man 2, 2004, so a couple years later, and this is where we get Doc Ock as the primary villain. We kind of see some things go down with Harry and Peter, like certain relationships are building off, and then the other big thing is like Peter's going through again an identity crisis, right? Not really knowing what's happening with his Spidey powers and all of that. And as a kid, it confused the hell out of me. As an adult, obviously I get it a little bit more now. I've read a crap ton of comics from that era, so it's just it's a little bit more understandable. But as a kid, it definitely played a part of like, what's going on? Like, why doesn't he have his powers? Like, why is he losing them? Why does he now want to be Spider-Man all of a sudden? Like, it kind of confused me at times, right? I also got to say, I don't mind the relationship between Peter and Mary Jane, but I feel like out of all the Spider-Man movies, I feel like this trilogy with Tobey Maguire, the relationship that he has with Mary Jane is probably the weakest. At least this trilogy. It's not necessarily bad, but like we'll get to it in a second. But the Andrew Garfield, one of my favorite aspects of Andrews is the relationship between Peter and Spidey and Gwen Stacy, because in the comics it's way stronger than people really remember, mostly because it's an older comic now and Gwen Stacy's been dead for years and years and years. But like that relationship, that first girlfriend, is like super powerful, and that's why that death was so meaningful. And so you really feel that in Andrews, and not that Mary Jane and Peter don't get along, but like I don't know, I didn't feel as much tension or just as much love in the air as you could say. But one of the shining parts of this movie is Doc Ock. I love the relationship we get with Doc Ock and Peter. I love Doc Ock, and this is just the animation, the CGI, everything in this movie was really great when it came to Doc Ock and Spider-Man. The train scene is obviously iconic to this day. And I gotta say, there's a lot I love about this movie. It's just like a step down below Spider-Man 1 for Tobey Maguire. Like, I probably give like a 6.5 or 7 out of 10, but it's not far. I really, really enjoyed it. Like I said, Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is probably the most iconic, best live action Spider-Man villain it is. Doc Ock is probably a close second for me. He's brilliant in this movie, and we see some of that brilliance again later on in No Way Home. But I really, really loved it in this. So yeah, I say probably like a 6.5, 7 out of 10, just a step below the first Spider-Man.
Yeah, I'm gonna give this one a 7 out of 10. I enjoy it too a lot. It's a fun one to watch, and Sammy said that it had great CGI for the time. It absolutely did. I mean, I've seen CGI today that's not as good in some aspects. Who knows if it's more attention to detail as opposed to whatever, but it was really well done. I mean, there's some crazy shots in there when the power of the sun is sinking into the water. It's like, oh my gosh, that looks just realistic for the sun being on Earth or whatever. But it was really fun. I give it less than the Spider-Man 1 because, I don't know, maybe it is part of Mary Jane in there. It wasn't as entertaining, wasn't as good. Either way, I think this is good. Not as great as the first one. I give this one a 7 out of 10.
Then we finally have Spider-Man 3, 2007. Now, this was a huge movie at the time. The first two Spider-Man had high success. This brought a lot of attention to the box office. And this one's probably the least favorite out of the whole Tobey Maguire era. And I would probably agree, but I'll say growing up, this was like one of my favorite movies. And it mostly had to do with, this was all the toys from the toy bin smashed together. And it was so fun seeing characters like Venom, Sandman, Harry Osborn's Green Goblin, right, Spidey. And just like everything smashed together. It's like, it was so fun to see that, because really up until then we hadn't seen anything like that, you know what I mean? And I really, really love that part of, Spider-Man 3. Now, obviously, in retrospect, there's a lot of holes in this movie. There's a lot missing. The pacing is crazy. There's a lot of like plot holes in this movie. I'm not gonna hold it too much against it. This is a movie from 2007. The era of superhero movies has vastly changed from then. But for what it was during its time, I don't think it was so awful that like it took you out of the movie. I love the Venom in this movie. I gotta say, I love the Sandman in this movie. Obviously, I think one of the biggest holes is the Harry Osborn, but even then, I still really like that relationship. Again, I feel like a lot of the holes in this movie is the relationship Peter has with characters, like Peter Parker, not necessarily Spider-Man. Spider-Man in this movie, Spider-Man in all of these movies is frankly fantastic, but the Peter Parker leaves a little to, like anytime Peter's on the screen, it's like, not necessarily the scenes are boring, but it's like there's not as much vibrance to the scene. And whether it's to MJ or to Harry, it's like just to feel like there's things missing. But for the end of this series, for the end of this trilogy, I do think this movie's fantastic. It's probably similar to Spider-Man 2. I'd probably get like a 6.5 or 7 out of 10. I really, really liked it. I think this is a pretty good way to end the trilogy. It's not necessarily perfect, but it's not necessarily so bad that it, leaves it in a rough spot retrospectively.
Yeah, I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. 7.5 out of 10. I like this a bit more than I like Spider-Man 2. But Sammy said it. The villains were great. And the fact that you got two villains, really. You got Venom, you got Sandman, and then you got two heroes. It didn't feel like we had so much crammed in there to where it didn't... I mean, the pacing wasn't great at times, but it didn't feel like they were just trying to shove it all down your throat and feed it to you. I mean, Sandman was really just a low-level criminal who became a supervillain, and we got enough plot about him to make you actually care for him and feel bad for him, but not so much to where he's the main villain of the whole thing. I mean, he's up there. Venom was up there too. I despise the Spider-Man scenes with Peter Parker because of how awkward they are, but that's how they are meant to be. He is meant to be looking like a complete idiot out there, and they do that really well. I mean, I'm not taking any personal bias out of this. I enjoyed this movie a lot.
I forgot to completely mention that. We get evil Spidey in this movie, Black Suit Spider-Man. Yeah, I mean, those scenes are kind of weird. They're kind of awkward. They become memes now, and people feel more biased and nostalgic because of that. but really at the time they were really goofy, really out of nature for the whole Spider-Man series. I'll say the Black Suit Spider-Man was awesome as a kid. It was dope. It was cool. It was, again, this movie had a lot. I forget because it's been a while, but like it had a lot of like just again toys from the toy bin. You just put everything together. It was like really, really fun, really, really cool. So I really, really liked it. Then we head into the Andrew Garfield era with Amazing Spider-Man from 2012. Again, I gotta say, I just love Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield's relationship with Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker. I'm not gonna try to harp on it too much, but for both of these movies, I think it's absolutely fantastic. Now, the introduction of Peter into Spidey is not as strong in this one as it is in the first Spider-Man, in my opinion. It's not necessarily bad, but it's just not as good. It's a little bit rushed at times. There's things that are like core components that are missing. I just don't think there was as much emphasis on that beginning, but it's not bad. And I gotta say, the Lizard being the first villain is really, really fun, and then Detective or whatever it is, Deputy or Gwen Stacy's dad, that sacrifice, that relationship that he has with Peter is really, really cool. I really enjoyed that part of the movie. And you know how Peter deals with the Lizard and all of that. I like, this movie isn't perfect, but I really love Andrew's Spider-Man. It's probably one of my favorite Spider-Man. Like the actual Spider-Man himself, I think is so fun. He's so quippy. Even when he's like not feeling it, like you can see him depressed in the halls. As soon as he puts on the mask, it's like he can't help himself, and it's super fun because that's, a lot of ways, that's how Peter is in the comics, and so it's really fun. No matter what, there's very few arcs where Spider-Man's not quippy. It's very few Spider-Man arcs where he's not go-getty and like talking trash to the villains and making jokes. So I love that aspect. I love the cinematography, the different shots we get of him swinging. So good. It's probably my favorite out of all the Spider-Man movies. That's my personal opinion, but I really, really loved it from these Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. I'd probably give this one a 7 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10, somewhere. No, 7, just a step between the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, but above the other two Spider-Man by Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna give this one I think I'm gonna give it a solid 7 out of 10. I will say something that I'm not really rating it on, but I think it does amazing. The visuals were beautiful in this. I love the look of his suit, which doesn't look any crazy difference from one movie to another for the most part, but I really liked the Andrew Garfield suit for those movies. And then whenever you got the lizard scene and there's gas going everywhere, it gave me like that vibe from the Dark Knight trilogy where there's gas everywhere. I don't know, everything is wet and it was like a dark, mysterious. It was really cool. And one thing that I do like about this movie that brings it up for me a lot was the relationship with Peter Parker and his parents. Or, I mean, they're dead obviously, but he finds their briefcase and
That's the second one.
that was the second one. Dang it. Sorry. I take it back. 6.5 out of 10. I really like that plot line. I apologize. Lizard looks amazing. It was very fun plot. It was weird and good, but I mean, I will say for 2012, it looked damn amazing. There's a lot of CGI these days that doesn't look as good. Overall, it was just really fun. And the Peter Parker side, I hear some people don't like I've seen online, some people don't like the Andrew Garfield Peter Parker as much as Tobey Maguire, and they think he's way worse. And I'm like, I wouldn't say by far one is way better than the other. I think they're both very good Peter Parkers for the most part. I mean, you can have your opinion on who you like better than the other, but I don't think you can say this Andrew Garfield Peter Parker is bad by any means. I think he's honestly almost more relatable than Tobey Maguire at times.
Yeah. That brings us to Amazing Spider-Man 2, 2014. I gotta say, this movie has some really cool stuff. I think this is a lot of people's least favorite, which I can understand, but to me, this is like one of those ones like it just depends on what kind of mood I'm in, because it has some really fun, cool stuff that I absolutely love. The whole Gwen Stacy arc, especially towards the end, it's just super emotional. I absolutely adore it. I know a lot of people don't like Electro in this movie, but like growing up watching this the first time, whatever. The first time watching it, second time watching it, I absolutely loved the way Electro looked. but the opposite cannot be stated enough. The Green Goblin in this movie is horrendous. It looks like diarrhea poop. I don't think we'll ever get a worse live action villain or portrayal in any of the Spider-Man movies. Absolutely terrible. And that whole arc is awful. The whole Norman Osborn's dying and Harry Osborn's here, and he's always been best friends with Peter. It's like it was shoehorned in. It was terrible. It's done. It can't be dealt with now. But man, can I emphasize that was such a terrible arc that like it does. I can understand why it ruins the movie for a lot of people, because a lot of time was wasted in that movie for that arc, and it was just bad. It was just not good. It was shoehorned in, and it was shoehorned in not well, and so that is something I cannot state enough. It probably is one of the lower Spider-Man movies, but man, can I not state I love the Gwen Stacy part of this movie. I really do like the Electro part, not just like the visuals of like the lightning bolts and the electricity flowing through things. That obviously goes without saying, it's really, really cool. But like him being electric and blue, I thought was just a really cool idea, reminding me of the Living Laser, an Iron Man villain. I just recently read I just finished Matt Fraction's Invincible Iron Man, and one of the characters, one of the villains is the Living Laser, and it kind of resembles something like that, like where he's transparent, but he's got this electricity coursing through his body. He shapes and shifts with it. I think it looks awesome. And obviously Jamie Foxx is an excellent actor, so he can probably put anything to life and make it work. So I like that part of the movie a lot. It's really a shame that, again, Athen mentioned prematurely with the other movie, the arc with the parents and like this newfound mystery with that. It's kind of a new idea that was brought in, and it was, I think, at the very least intriguing. Who knows how they would have executed, but at the very least it was mysterious and intriguing, and such a disservice, and honestly just a tragic story that I don't think they're ever going to be able to finish that story that they didn't finish, and that also kind of ruins it. No one going back watching that, like, I don't think we're ever going to get a conclusion to that arc.
No, yeah.
I'd probably give it a 6.5 out of 10. Maybe 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I was going to say 8 out of 10, but that Green Goblin arc was so bad I forgot about it. And now that I'm remembering it, it takes it down the list. But this is one of, if you're talking about the older 5 Spider-Mans, this is probably my favorite one to just go back and watch. I mean, there's a lot of dumb, funny quips in here. There's a lot of, great visuals. Again, I think this is on par, if not almost better than the Spider-Man Homecoming trilogy, the Tom Holland, when it comes to visuals, which just makes me feel like it's ahead of its time, because 10 years later, it's, in my opinion, competing or just as good as the Tom Holland one is. But considering that Green Goblin arc I'm going to take it down to a 7. That was miserable and a waste of time for the little bits we saw in here. But then again, I really, really enjoyed that parents of Peter Parker having an actual plot, right? Because in every iteration of Spider-Man, I haven't read hardly any comics on him, so I'm just going to say off TV shows, off of movies, his parents are dead and no one cares, right? Oh, that sucks. That's horrible for you. But they don't play any real role in the story at all, and that's fine or whatever, but this just really intrigued me when I saw it at first. Electro, awesome. Visuals, awesome. Again, if they replaced that Green Goblin arc for something else and gave it some better plot in there, Gwen Stacy amazing too. This whole thing was great. Again, also tragic we never got a third one. That ending, and then I asked my mom, can we watch the next one? And there's not a next one, and I was just beyond disappointed, because it's literally leading into the next movie right then and there. I was, whatever. It sucks, but it was a very fun movie, to say the least.
That brings us into the Tom Holland trilogy. Obviously, this is the newest one, so most fans are going to be more familiar with this stuff, so we'll try to go by it a little bit quicker now. But with all that being said, that brings us to Spider-Man Homecoming 2017, Tom Holland. This wasn't the introduction of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but it was his first movie in the MCU. So that kind of does play a part of it. When you're not necessarily even introduced brand new into your own standalone movie, leaves a little bit to be anticipated. But nonetheless, it was the MCU Spider-Man, so a lot of fans were hyped. The MCU in general is just bigger, more grandiose than the other Spider-Man. With that being said, though, I gotta say, I love Amazing Spider-Man 2. probably one of these two that are my least favorite. I not that I don't like Spider-Man: Homecoming, but this one doesn't do very well on standing up on its own feet. It definitely depends on it definitely stands on the events of Civil War and the relationship between Tony and Robert Downey Jr. with Tom Holland and Spider-Man. It's hard for it to stand on its own 2 feet with Tom Holland and Spider-Man. And I don't necessarily know if it's anyone's fault. It's just at the time of what was happening, you couldn't really be bigger than the Avengers, right? And so they were trying to lean on that, kind of help this movie, help this character along. And it works for what it is. But the introduction of Spider-Man, there's no introduction. It just jumps right into an arc. And the arc isn't bad. I don't mind it. I like Peter in school. We really get to see him in school in this one more than any other Spider-Man. I love that because Peter starts as a teenager. He hasn't been a teenager in God knows how long, but like his inception in Marvel was a teenager in high school, right? And that's where a lot of his relationships as characters come from. And so to start in that and really make an emphasis on that, I really, really appreciate it. That's one of my favorite parts about Tom Holland Spider-Man is he's in high school. He has high school friends. He has high school problems. He has high school drama. Because that plays a part of his character, and I really, really appreciate that part. I love the Spider-Man suit. I love the technology, but I can understand where a lot of fans don't like that he's just given that all to start with. Because, again, part of Spider-Man's mythos and stories going through the struggle of figuring out new problems and solving them with Spider-Man suit, Spider-Man, the web slingers, all that stuff, and kind of just all giving it to him is kind of, it's problematic for a lot of fans. For me, I didn't really care, but I can understand why a lot of people don't. And comparing this to the other Spider-Man movies, I would agree. It doesn't stand on its own feet too well. The villain is okay. It's not bad. I think Michael Keaton does an excellent job. He's an excellent actor. But the Vulture is just not as interesting compared to a lot of these other villains, in my opinion. He's not bad by any means. He's just not as interesting. Mysterio is better, and the villains for No Way Home are better. So I think he's just probably the weakest of Tom Holland's villains, but he's still good. And I think that's about it. It's not a bad movie. It's probably one of the more forgettable ones, mostly because Tom Holland has so much in his mythos already that this movie's probably the most forgettable, the most I guess say less enjoyable of his mythos so far in the MCU. So I like it. It's not bad, but it's probably the weakest. I'd probably give this a 6 out of 10 comparative to the other Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, on that same scale, I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10. I thought it was a pretty decent movie. It's a fun watch to go back. Now, one thing I will say is I feel like they tried to make it a pretty grounded, hey, here's Spider-Man movie, right? And I think if you're doing that, make the first 20-30 minutes be a prequel to Civil War on how he started doing his stuff. Make it a sped up shot for shot, kind of like what we're expecting to be in Spider-Man Brand New Day, of just a whole bunch of time passing by in 5 years, but it's 5 minutes. I think that was a huge miss. We don't know how he got his powers in this universe. We see him making web fluid. We don't see him designing these things. And the problem, I don't have the biggest problem with him being handed technology from Tony Stark, but it does look a lot like he's not as smart when he's handed it. He's smart because you watch the movie, and he is dumb in some ways because he's a teenager, but he's a genius in other ways because he's designing stuff. But his web shooter, it'd be really cool if there was some, hey, this is my old design, I have this, whatever. And it's a fun movie to watch overall, but I think they missed the balance of, hey, Vulture's not a huge villain, right? So Vulture's not a huge villain. Focus a ton on the Peter Parker part. And if you're gonna do that, show some of him getting his powers, because that is what everyone loves, to put yourself in Spider-Man's shoes and him be this relatable kid. But he starts out not relatable, so it's harder to put yourself in his shoes.
Yeah. Then we go to Spider-Man Far From Home 2019. Now, this was right off the heels of the death of Tony. Now, it obviously goes without saying that also plays a huge part in this movie, right? Again, the relationship with Tony and Peter is huge in this movie. And I think it's fine because Tony doesn't have as much as a presence. It's just those story beats play off of it. But for all the other Spider-Man movies, they are contained to their own Spider-Man movies. They don't build off of other characters, other movies. They build off of themselves. So again, it feels like a huge lack of character development and story development because it's playing the heroes off of something else. I completely acknowledge that, and I I don't necessarily hold it as a problem, but comparative, it does make it not as strong, right? And it makes the characters not as developed and the story not as developed. I completely concur with those ideas. I still like this movie. I think Mysterio is super fun. Mysterio in this movie is cool. I really, really like Jake Gyllenhaal. Does an excellent job. The story of him kind of being retconned in there with Tony is really fun, cool idea. And I absolutely love the reveal at the end of Peter being Spider and the way Mysterio does it. It's super cool. I love that. The relationships and like the reveals with MJ and Ned in this movie is really, really fun. I really like that as well. It all being overseas, that's actually probably one of my least favorite parts of this movie. I get the idea not everything can be in New York, but again, Spider-Man's a New Yorker. He always has been. So every time he's not and it's his standalone movie, it just kind of seems out of place for his character. If you're in an Avengers movie, I get that. You don't have to be in New York. It doesn't need to be in New York. But if you're a Spider-Man movie fighting a Spider-Man villain with Spider-Man characters and a Spider-Man cast, your whole movie not being in New York or never really being in New York does feel weird. Does feel out of character. And I definitely felt it throughout the whole movie. And I like Spider-Man in this movie, but I feel like we get way more Peter than we do ever get Spider-Man. And that is a huge problem with me for this movie. I don't remember a lot of Spider-Man scenes. I really only remember a lot of Peter scenes from this movie. And maybe that's just because I haven't seen it in a minute, but I definitely remember that and not really loving that part about this movie. So I don't think it's bad, but I probably put this on par with Spider-Man 2 and 3 for Tobey Maguire. It's not bad. It has its fun parts. I like it. It's gonna stand the test of time with all of Tom Holland's work. I think it's gonna be fine. I think it works really well for a prequel after the events of Avengers Endgame, but it doesn't do well in standing on its own feet either, much like Homecoming. So I'd probably give this a 6.5 out of 10, 6.5 to 7 out of 10, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. I did like it more than Homecoming. Again, I kind of agree with Sammy on the location part. You could have made this entire plot and kept it in New York, and I don't think there would have been any real problem with that. But alas, take that away. Mysterio was a great villain. One of the things that I do like about this is there are those side characters that you see in all the MCU movies, but Happy is like pretty close to a Spider-Man character almost. Obviously, he's introduced in Iron Man. He's in all the Iron Mans after Tony Stark dies. I mean, he's tight with Spider-Man because he doesn't really have a superhero to be with now, and it seems like he has all his focus on there. And you see the relationship between Happy, Start, and Homecoming, and it keeps progressing and progressing up until the point where he recognizes Happy and doesn't believe what he's seeing, so he has to. That was a very big emotional point. And Sammy pointed out that there's a lot less Spider-Man, a lot more Peter. It's a lot of a mental battle in this movie. So I think like even the Spider-Man scenes was Peter talking to himself. It wasn't really a fighting, punching the bad guys, destroying the drones. It was a lot of Peter just freaking out, not being able to trust what he sees. So it was more of a mental battle than a physical one oftentimes. Overall, great movie. I didn't know Mysterio was the villain coming into this because I didn't read the comics or anything, and that plot twist completely got me. So that was that was one of my favorite experiences of watching a Spider-Man movie, was watching this one in theaters.
And lastly, that brings us to Spider-Man No Way Home 2021. All the Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland. And obviously there's some recency bias that goes without saying, but this is probably my favorite, and I'll explain why in a second. But this is kind of the incarnation of just appreciating every Spider-Man that came before, every villain, every actor, every story, and trying to wrap a bow on it and try to tie it all in and appreciate it all. And I love it. It's a great tie into the multiverse saga for the MCU. I think both introductions in Tom Holland or Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield into the MCU was really fun, really cute. I really love that. All the villains are excellent in this movie. And overall, the action is probably Tom Holland's best in this movie alone. I gotta say, there's a lot of this movie I really like. I don't think there's a lot of this movie I don't not like. I don't remember anything from this movie I'm like, I don't like that part. All these other Spider-Man movies, I've given certain things I didn't like. I liked a lot of them, but there's certain things I didn't like. There wasn't really much I didn't like from this movie. There's a really good job of tying off the trilogy for Tom Holland. Even though the trilogy is probably the weakest out of all the Spider-Man movies, this does probably the best job. Does better than Spider-Man 3 in my opinion of wrapping up this trilogy, and much better than everything. It does a really good job of tying it up. But it does a really good job of setting up a new Spider-Man. It does a really good job of setting up a brand new day kind of a thing for Spider-Man. I really, really love that. It does a really good job of resetting Spider-Man, getting him to be his own character finally, and go through these trials and tribulations, and I love all of that. I love the kind of closure we get with Toby and Andrew. I love the relationship we get with all of them together. The cinematography at the end is absolutely amazing. The still shots we get where they're all swinging over the Statue of Liberty is awesome. And, you know, obviously Doctor Strange's spell and all of that, if you read Spider-Man comics, especially I started with the Straczynski era, the early 2000s, and if you know anything about Spider-Man comics, you know what that leads to, One More Day, and then in turn Brand New Day. You know, there's a lot of, you know, anger and diversity, or not diversity, but divisiveness that comes with that. But at the very least, it does a good job of setting something up. It does a good job of resetting, and this is in turn something similar, right? You might not love the One More Day event, but a lot of people do love the Brand New Day stories that we get. And this is something similar. You might not love the Multiverse Saga, but you are probably going to love Brand New Day, just from the trailers we can get and everything I've seen from the reviews. I'm excited. I know a lot of fans are excited. I absolutely love this movie. I'd probably give it an 8.5, maybe 9 out of 10. It's probably my favorite. This does a really good job, and I'll explain here in a second, of really lifting the whole Tom Holland Spider-Man experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Holland in the first one and the second one are alright. There was a lot of mixed reviews. A lot of people just completely didn't like them because they're hard set. Andrew Garfield's best. They're hard set. Tobey Maguire is the best. But this one right here, nobody can deny it was a fun movie, no matter which area you're a fan of. They kept it a secret as long as they could that all 3 Spider-Men were going to be in this movie, but that didn't last. It was an amazing movie to watch. The only little thing that I wasn't loving at the time was, I'm like, really? Doctor Strange is sitting here making a spell and asking Peter if he's sure after he's already half made the spell, and then it messes up like he didn't think it through before? It's in comics. Doctor Strange made a mistake. That happens all the time. That ain't anything to really be upset about. That did weird me out at first. But again, visual was amazing. There's a ton of Easter eggs in there. Just a bunch of small random stuff in there. Electro, oh, this power feels different. And that's a tribute to the fact that it's all through an arc reactor power grid. It's just a bunch of dumb little fun stuff like that. And Willem Dafoe is absolutely amazing. Like, that little twist at the end where he starts, that little spidey sense of yours is really something. Like, that was, I had chills when I was watching it. Probably recency bias, whatever. This has got to be my favorite of all the Spider-Mans. It ties them all together. There's nothing really negative. It's just a fun experience all the way through. Giving it an 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I love the Andrew Garfield closure we get. I love the Toby closure we get with his villains, because his villains mean a lot more to him than I think the rest of the Spider-Man villains mean to them, which I gotta say I really appreciate about Toby's character in Spider-Man. And then obviously the Aunt May closure we get is probably the most impactful here than any other Spider-Man. So overall, kind of comparing all these Spider-Man, it's a close contest. I'm not gonna lie. If I say I like one more than the other, please don't flame in the comments, because I think all of these Spider-Man are great, and if you have one that you preferred over the other, I appreciate that. But for me personally, and what I prefer, reading comics, you call me whatever you want in the comments, but I love when all the toys from the toy box are smashed together. I really, really do, because you get to see the most unreal storytelling that you're ever going to experience. I don't mind these cool character dives, but you get a lot more of those than you get these over-the-top, like Spider-Man No Way Home. So I probably, for my personal opinion, I put Tom Holland Spider-Man above. He doesn't have the best Peter Parker, he doesn't have the best Spider-Man, he doesn't have the best villains, but he does a really good way of just closing it all together. He does a really good way of, in the end, getting back up and fighting, and I really love that about Tom Holland Spider-Man. I love the closure. The closure means everything. The story doesn't have to be fantastic, but if you can close it in a really, really meaningful, impactful way, it uplifts the rest of the story, and No Way Home does that really, really, really well. It uplifts the hell out of it. In a really, really close second, I absolutely love Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. Gwen Stacy, that whole arc is super, super important to me. I love that. I love Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, the quippiness, the humor, super, super big fan of it. And I love Tobey's. Tobey's acting is just weird to me sometimes. He just seems like out of it, but I know it's just the way he acts. But I'll never forget it. I'll never forget Tobey's Spider-Man. That's what I grew up on. Before I watched X-Men, before I watched Fantastic Four, before I watched eventually Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, I started with Tobey's Spider-Man, and it'll always be my first live-action Marvel or any superhero movie I watch. So I'll always love it for what it is. But that's kind of where I would compare all of those movies in those eras.
Yeah, I'm probably getting flamed in the comments here because I have an unpopular opinion. Andrew Garfield's my favorite. I absolutely believe that if he had a third movie, that would have been an absolutely amazing one. People would have loved it. It would have done extremely well. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but those were my two favorite. I mean, I feel he got really personal with the villains, right? I mean, I know obviously you got Tobey Maguire. He knows Green Goblin. He knows Doc Ock before all this, but I really feel like Andrew Garfield was out there having heart-to-hearts with Electro. I really feel like Andrew Garfield was, I can't remember the character's name for the lizard, but really having...
Connors.
Yeah, Connors, Dr. Connors. He was really personal with Dr. Connors, and that brings it up for me. I mean, when I was watching these couple years after they came out, I was all in that mentality that, oh, it's a superhero movie, the good guy always gets the girl, and oh my gosh, she dies. That's insane. Like, this isn't not that any of these are, but none of these are and everything went happily ever after movies, and this is just, I don't know, it's really personal, it's really fun, I absolutely love it.
I want to say, much like the way Ed Brubaker like just captured a surreal moment in his Captain America when he brought the Winter Soldier and it would turn out to be Bucky Barnes, right? It was one of the most surreal retcons, story reveal moments ever in comics history in the last 20-30 years. The same goes for Gwen Stacy and her death. When she died in comics, it was like, that's not real, right? Like, he's imagining that, or like that's just like a vision. When she dies in comics and like Peter actually has to go through that changed how comics were told. It changed how stories would go further. It changed the mythos of Spider-Man, but it just changed in general. Like, you can actually kill characters and it means something. It's not just a one-off or the comeback. No, that really impacted the story, really impacted comic storytelling. This does an excellent job of doing that. It does an excellent job of showing the death of Gwen Stacy, and you're like, wait, he saved her. He got the web saved her, right? Like, and that moment, like, no, she's gone. It's like, it's one of the most surreal moments in all of superhero movies, and that's why, again, I love the No Way. I got teary-eyed watching No Way Home and him saving MJ for Tom, and like he wasn't able to do that for his love, but he was able to do that for someone else. And like, you could see him, like the way Andrew acted that scene without saying a word, just acting it with his face. It was like, it's so powerful. One of the reasons I love that movie is for that scene alone. But again, Amazing Spider-Man 2 it's so good, but it has some really poopy butthole stuff. Yeah. So it's so close. I love all these Spider-Man movies. I'm, like I said, don't flame me in the comments. I love all of these Spider-Man movies. They're all great. And they all have their own problems, but they all have great things. So I know it's a lot. It's a longer video. We'll try to cut some of the fat down and edit. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. What you guys love, what you guys prefer, what you guys didn't like, what you guys disagree and agree with all of us down in the comments. And how excited you guys for Spider-Man Brand New Day, because man, am I excited for this movie. With all that being said, don't forget to hit that like, don't forget to hit that subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Peace.